Hey guys, subscribe for daily content, and if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks!
What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review slash knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Mr. Designs Zero, a pivotless, I mean it has a pivot, but on the front here, a pivotless minimalist design. We are going to open it up and see how this thing's put together here in just a moment. Thanks so much to Mr. Designs for sending this in for me to take a look at. I will link it down below so you guys can check it out. The person behind the Mr. Designs is Mihai Rusnik. I'm so sorry, almost certain that I mispronounced his name, but that is the gentleman. You can actually check them out on Instagram right here if you want to. This knife is OEM'd by Bestech. I'll let you guys take a look at the specs card here real quick, I don't know why I said it like that. We're still gonna do it the way that I do it just so we can be sure. Overall length here of this incredibly minimalist design coming in at 7.75 inches. Blade length is coming in at 3.35 and your cutting edge at 3 1/4. Is that what they gave me here? No, it's slightly different. Interesting. I wonder, I mean, everybody measures this stuff differently, so what are you going to do? But anyways, let's go ahead and do some size comparisons. Any custom scales that you find in this section can be found down in the description under Original Goat. Now, there's up against the 80-10 and the 80-20.5. This is a little longer than something like the 80-20.5, but it is substantially more compact than both, especially, you know, when you're talking like folded up. This is a super duper compact little design. Not the first time we've ever seen something like this, but yeah, it's much easier to carry than something like the 80-10. Let's go ahead and put it up against the the Spyderco PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3. Yeah, obviously kind of right in between. More cutting edge actually than both. Slightly more even than the PM2. And then finally up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case the Ritter Hogue and the Hogue Deca. How is the action on this knife? It's actually pretty darn good. There's a little bit of stick off the button, but that's pretty typical of plunge locks, which this absolutely is. I'll show that a little more here in just a second. The only means of deployment is this corner right here. And it actually works really, really well. In fact, I think it's pretty darn hard to fail. There's no jimping or anything, but it does exactly what you'd want it to do. Even push buttoning it, it kind of, unless you intentionally try to get your finger in that path, most deployment attempts will result in the blade coming out. I would just light switch it, but yeah, outside of a little bit of stick from the button, that's pretty much it. It does exactly what you'd want it to do. Let's go ahead and do carry profile. Thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. It's pretty thin. Yeah, definitely thinner than the Para 3. Length and height up against the PM2 and Para 3. This is going to be an easier object in general to carry than either because of the shape of it. It's not just thin, it's also just not, it's like it's like a lighter that's a little longer. Like that's essentially it, and has a pocket clip, right? Materials. What are we looking at for materials here? What you can actually see on the card, which, by the way, should include the HRC range. I said this in the Cypher video. Bestech, it typically lands anywhere, like when it comes to their M390, typically lands anywhere from 59 to 62. Usually the range that I see is the same as the industry standard, which is 59 to 61, which I consider not to be ideal when we're talking about typical pocket knife geometry, right? And the fact that pocket knives are typically not used like fixed blades, so you tend to be, you know, you get better performance, like when it doesn't really matter what steel it is, it tends to do better when it's on the higher end of the optimal range. So typically what the knife world, the knife community likes to see from M390 in normal pocket knife geometry is 60 to 62, which Bestech has also done before. They definitely have knives out there, either their own stuff or stuff that was designed by somebody else that is hitting that range. So where does this land? I don't know. Somewhere between 59 and 62, right? But I didn't have any issues with the edge fatiguing while I was carrying and using it. My carry and use tends to be pretty light. I don't go out and try to survive in the wilderness with this stuff. So it did fine there though. But anyways, M390, and then we have titanium for the frame here, which is kind of cool. Kind of fits together the way that a Strider Lego, is it the Lego one? There's no backspace, so this is all one piece right here. But we have titanium. You can get it in coated, or you can get it in like a bead blasted for $5 less. So there you go. Yeah, so super duper thin M390 and titanium. Very, very minimalist. That was the design here. Let's go ahead and do a hardware check and take the thing apart, because I believe the pivot screw and the pocket clip screw simply thread into the other side, but we won't know without taking it apart. Don't always do this, but because most knives have like a pretty typical construction, so I know what to expect. But this has not a typical construction, so we're actually going to take it apart and look inside. These tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use in this channel. I can already tell right now, both of these are going to be T8, and oh good, there's not... it doesn't appear to have any thread locker from the factory, which is nice because then you can do it yourself if you want to. Oh, interesting. There is a little pivot barrel in there. This is why it's good to do this here. The only other screw on the whole frame is right here. Oh, it's like there's like a springiness to it. Interesting. Okay, so this has got to come, this screw has to come out in order for the pocket clip to go up. And how are we going to do that? With that not wanting to come out. That's interesting. Little screw, you're going to have to come out in order for me to continue this video and not have to fill it up with meaningless dialogue while I fumble around with it. So this is a little bit of an issue right here. The screw has to come out in order for the pocket clip to come out, and it also has to come out in order for the knife to come apart. So, I mean, I have something here that I can get that out with, I'm sure, but it's a little bit obnoxious because the threads are going to grab and the screw's not really wanting to come completely out from between these prongs here for the pocket clip. So there we go. Yeah. That's a little bit annoying. Not an impossible thing, but just a little bit. It's mildly infuriating, I guess, is what we would normally say. So how does the pocket clip come out? And is that required to take the knife apart? Well, so this is kind of springing together, but I'm wondering, can I get, yeah, there we go. So you need to have both sides of this kind of come up at the same time. This pocket clip also doesn't even seem to want to come out there. But anyways, we are outside of, there we go, right there. So what's that? Okay, so there's a little pin here. Interesting. So this button, oh yeah, well the spring I guess is for the button. But let's take the blade out and actually take a look at the other side. So that is a pivot barrel that is just sitting inside. That's how they keep it in there, because it's underneath a plate. There you go. U.S. patent pending. Okay, so that's how they do that. So this backspacer section is actually all part of the scale. So outside of the issue with that screw, like just not wanting to come out from between the two prongs of the pocket clip, it's actually pretty cool. Pretty easy to do. Not really that much of an issue. Getting in there, or like getting the screws unthreaded, not a problem. It's just getting the screw to come back out of where it's supposed to be. But yeah, okay. Let's go ahead and put that spring back in there, and then we're gonna put this onto. Does the pocket clip even come out? Well, I guess it wouldn't, right? I mean, you can probably pull it out of there. It looks like it's like meant to stay in there. But anyways, let's see if we can get that back down here and here. Okay, well that was incredibly simple. And then this screw, see if I can just, the nice thing about this is that it's magnetized. There we go. So it can come out. It's just like really, really close. It's so close that it's just gonna have a hard time coming out of there. But not impossible, not by a long shot. So it's just those two. If it weren't for that screw there on the pocket clip, this would be like amazingly simple. Even with that spring in there in the button, amazingly simple. So that's kind of neat. It had a little bit of a surprise in there. I like those little types of surprises every now and then. I just kind of figured like there's something going on unexpected, and I really doubt, like, I thought it would be, the only thing that I could imagine in my head was that the pivot was just threaded into the other side, which I also was like, but that would be really weird. Right? So it's interesting to find out how they did that. So there you go. Runs on bearings came back just fine. Action still really good. It looks like the blade is still centered. And do we have any blade play? We do not. Very, very good. That's about what I'd expect from Bestech there. So you notice that the button is actually within a channel that's milled out on the blade, right? Plunge locks are not known for being incredibly strong. When you do it this way, you have more contact around the button. So it's fine, right? That is all the more that I would ever expect a button lock to stand up to. People going out and doing like hardcore spine whack tests on some stuff that's built like this, I think it's just kind of idiotic, right? I mean, because what on earth are you expecting of something like this? If that's what you want, if you're going to go out and do that with your knife, get a triad lock and then you can go do all of your weird caveman stuff that you wouldn't normally do with a folding knife and should probably just use a fixed blade for anyway. But on a button lock like this, the idea is not strength, it is convenience. And it does that, definitely. It's just a little bit of a stick there, and I've probably got it slightly too tight because it's not quite as smooth as it was when it came out. But the idea behind the button lock is to be strong enough to lock the blade out, but then convenient enough to disengage it and let it fall back down into the closed position, right? So, it does that. Anyways, weight on this knife. Like I said, titanium and M390, I doubt it weighs very much. Probably 3.5 to 3.75 ounces. No, not even 3.1 ounces, which is great because it's actually got a longer blade in terms of inches. So that's nice. I bet it's a little butt heavy, and it is. It's back away from the pivot, but it doesn't weigh enough for that really to be an issue anyway. Balance is much more of an issue when the knife is really heavy to begin with. So we've weighed it. Oh yeah, we need to do the blade stock thickness, which we'll actually have to do this with the blade out because the spine is completely hidden within the handle, or the blade is completely hidden within the handle in the closed position. So blade stock thickness on this guy, 80 thousandths. Super thin. Okay, meat and potatoes time. Yeah, they definitely accomplished the minimalist design. I don't always love, like when I hear minimalist without seeing the knife, I go, ooh, because a lot of minimalist designs here within the last few years have just ended up being lazy, right? Minimalist is kind of a fancy word for lazy. And I don't know, a lot of people could say that the knife that I designed looks lazy and, not original or anything like that. And I suppose that's fair. I don't like it when we just take like a rectangle and a long triangle and put it together and call it a minimalist knife, right? I want there to be some other element because we've got that stuff. The minimalist category is thoroughly covered. So if you're going to do something in that category, it's nice to give it a little bit of personality. This has personality. I think this is cool. The way that they've done that, where they have no hardware visible. Look at the knife. There's nothing there. All you can see is the button lock and the flipper tab. It's kind of cool, right? There's not even a spot where, well, I guess there's no mounting position for the pocket clip, but there's nothing for the pocket clip either. It would have been really cool to have the two little slots right here so the pocket clip could mount over here. But then it's like, how would you do that without putting a screw here? So I get why they didn't do it because the whole goal was just to have this as the aesthetic. So that is neat, right? It's, it doesn't look like anything special in the open position, but watching this video and getting to see everything on the inside, you kind of understand what's going on here. And it is cool. I really appreciate that it's big enough that most people are going to be able to get a full grip on it. The issue with knives like this is that there's nothing stopping your finger from riding up on the edge if you're not paying attention. This isn't the type of knife that I expect most people will be taking out into the wilderness. This is more of a regular Joe EDC, maybe just like a large office carry, right? So probably a knife that you only get out to make quick cuts here and there, and it will do that just fine. Just be very, very cognizant. Ergonomics, it feels exactly like what you'd expect it to feel like, given that the handle is essentially just a long, flat rectangle with smoothed out edges. So there's no real lock-in. There's no real texturing or anything like that. I think texturing would have been really, really nice on this, considering we have it's just perfectly straight. But they are achieving a look here. So it's not like they're like, whoops, we forgot to make it ergonomic. Like clearly the idea was to keep this straight. So it's kind of, I guess, a little bit of a trade-off there. You do have some jimping up here, which is just barely functional. You got the designer logo right here, a nice little satin finish on the blade. Please excuse my fingerprints. Just a classic long drop point blade, very thin and definitely thin behind the edge. Even if this is not heat treated like perfectly, you know, when I say perfectly, it's like by the standards of the general knife community. Let's say they ended up at 59 Rockwell hardness for the M390, which is not what most people would consider to be ideal, right? Every now and then you get somebody who goes, actually, it'd make a lot more sense for an M390 fixed blade because you're going to use it harder and a higher Rockwell hardness would make it shatter. Yeah, but is M390 the right steel for a fixed blade? Is the answer to reduce the HRC of M390 for your fixed blade or to use a different steel? No, it's not. That argument is ridiculous. When we're talking about pocket knife geometry, like ideally you would be on the upper end of the optimal range for M390, which would be something like 60 to 62. You can even push it past that. Some custom makers will go 63, even 64 at M390. But I think for a production pocket knife, most of us can agree 60 to 62 is about where we'd expect it. Anyways, don't mean to get off on a rant. The geometry of this blade alone will make up for a lot of, you know, if you end up with 59 or so, it'll make up for a lot of the, you know, where M390 is going to lack in performance because of the hardness. The geometry alone will allow this knife to continue to slice and slice and slice. Geometry is incredibly important when it comes to blade performance. This is a thin blade. It is not meant to be super durable. The tip is very, very thin. So if you're going to make light pokes and continuous cuts into materials that are far softer than the blade, this will do a very, very good job of that, for sure. And it'll do a good job of that for a long time. I like the pocket clip because it's on the shorter side. And when you have a pocket clip that's on the shorter side, it doesn't go into the middle of your hand while you're squeezing it. So it's actually really, really comfortable. The edges are also nicely knocked down. I don't love the aesthetic of a wire clip, but they were smart and chose to do the same as the body color. So it really completes that minimalist look. I know a lot of people would say a nice, simple milled titanium clip that was the same color would be a little bit better, I guess, right? But they went with this, and I don't have an issue with it. It would have been nice, I guess, like in terms of, you know, when you look up the price of this, I guess it would have made you feel a little bit better if it had a titanium pocket clip, right? I don't know. It just depends on which side of that you're on. I think other people might point out, like, you know, it doesn't even have a titanium backspacer. Well, technically, it does, right? The entire thing back here is just more titanium. It doesn't have a separate piece of material that is acting as the backspacer between two independent pieces of titanium that are the scales, right? But there's still a fair amount of titanium here. There's just not a lot going on with it. The stop pin is actually also internal. We can see it up here. So the stop pin's also internal. It's carved out on the blade to make room for that. But anyways, the blade locks out in the open position with no blade play up, down, left, to right. Like a little bit of lock stick. That'll come and go, as button locks do, right? Don't put oil on that button lock. A lot of people are tempted to put oil on it so that it doesn't stick. Don't do that. It's better that it sticks and locks up properly than is lubricated and easy to disengage, but much more likely to accidentally disengage. Do not put oil on the lock face of any knife. Not a good idea. Even if your Grandpa Joe told you to do it, Grandpa Joe doesn't know what he's talking about. Don't do that. Anyways, no pivot lash, nice and smooth and consistent in here. Man, the detent feels almost non-existent, but I think it's because it engages so low. Yeah, it's way in there. But it's really satisfying to deploy. So yeah, the detent is super light. Can I shake it out? Yeah, I can. But I can also do that with my XM24, and my XM24 has one of the heaviest detents in my entire collection. So I don't think it's likely it'll come out in your pocket. Anyways, centered, no detent lash, which is surprising for a plunge lock. $285. Wow, that's steep. Mr. Designs must be greedy. It's like I said in the Cypher review, it's far less likely it's Mr. Much more likely that it's Bestech going, okay, if you're going to do a small batch, we're going to charge you a lot of money for it, because he has to pay to have these made by Bestech. Small batch, when you're a designer and having an OEM like Bestech or whoever, it's pretty expensive. They don't leave you a ton of room. So can you go get something from Bestech right now that's utilizing the same materials for less money? Yes, but that's because they made it. And they probably made a ton of them. So it's really hard to compete there, right? It seems like it should all be the same playing field, like a level playing field, but it isn't. It's anything but a level playing field when it comes to this stuff. So it is a little high, but it's also cool, right? If we were like comparing it to like, your typical like ultra high volume production Chinese stuff, Best Deck, right? Miguron especially, then, $220 is I think what people would want to see it at. So it's $280 or $285. It is cool for people looking for that really, really minimalist look and, with a little something extra there, a little something special. I think you guys will really enjoy this. And the nice thing is it is made very, very well because Best Deck is a good OEM. It's got a little bit of button stick. I would expect yours to have that as well. And, it might go away and then come back and then go away and come back. It's just nature of the beast with this type of locking system. But they did a good job with this. Not something I'm going to tell people that they need to be busting down doors to get in their pockets. But it is cool. If you like this, I think you'll be happy with it. But it's because of the rules set in place by the OEM, which is kind of unfair to Mr. Mister. I think the price is a little bit high. So do what you will with that information. I will link this down in the description. That's going to be it today. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex and on TikTok at the_metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.